Welcome to TLC for the Soul podcast, where soul meets spirit. You have entered into sacred space. I'm your host, Tammy Lynn Chambers, and I'm here to help you shine. Now let's get going on this podcast journey. Hello, friends. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. We are here with the second part of Brighdy Isle. A little bit more lighthearted fun from Abigail and Dakkar. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Welcome to our family. It's a beautiful spring morning as I sit outside amongst the wildflowers and the bird song to record this episode for you. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. As we settle in, for me, this podcast is a little bit of, I usually record it on Sunday mornings, a little bit of Sunday respite. Go sit outside and connect with you all and connect with the spirits of this land and this place around me. As always on the podcast, you choose how you want to listen. If you're new here, you may just want to settle in, and you may just be here for the story. These books, all of my writings are reaching more people now. You may be coming after you've read the ebook, coming to hear the audio version. Or if you're listening to these audio versions, you may want to go read the ebooks. So the first two books of the Bringers of the Light series are out there now on Smashwords. I think that's the best place to go find them. They're everywhere else, but I went to a couple of different places like Kobo, Apple Books, Google Books. I kind of perused what was out there yesterday, and they're fine, they're out there, but I like the way they're laid out in Smashwords, which is my publisher, because you can see all the series and everything, and the most current version of the books are there. They're all free to read. But yeah, I found some of these other places don't refresh, so if I put in like an updated manuscript or an updated cover, which I've had to do a couple of times on some books, the other places don't seem to refresh those. Probably the best one for doing that is probably Apple. Apple seemed to be the one that if I made an update, they refreshed most often or looked the most current to me. Apple and maybe Scribed. So anyway, beside the point. So you may just want to listen to the story, see how we roll here at TLC for the Soul. You may choose to listen from a higher perspective as I wrap us all in love light and light love. Calling in the spirit guides who want to join me as we tell this story. Bringers of the light, all our friends, Abigail, Dakkar, Tambor, Jameson, Polly Willikers, the other friends from Spectre and Book Coven and from Rockaway Point, spirits of Brighdy Isle, Count Mashar, Maggie, all the friends we've met along the way to this point. As we tell the stories that they've channeled through me, the conduit, stories of the intent for healing, uplifting, enlightening, just enjoying the story, having fun. Or if you want to take your listening experience to an even higher level, you can invite in your own spirit guides and helpers into this sacred circle and ask for any meanings or metaphors or messages from the story that pertain to you and your journey. If there are some, or if the guides, as we're telling the story here, want to interject with anything, they will. A lot of times there's things that I see around me that are messages for us that I'll share with you. As I'm recording this right now, it is the new moon in Aries day. I'm recording this on Sunday, the 11th of April. Obviously, all the stories are timeless. But there's just a little bit of a feeling of pulling back and going within and kind of refilling your own cup at this time. That's very important for the journey moving forward. So if you feel like you're pulling back from certain situations or people or whatever, it doesn't mean that you don't, you don't still have a vested interest in all of your intentions and all that. It just means you need some time to refill your cup. So without further ado, when we last left Abigail and Dakkar, they both had felt like over the winter months they had drifted apart a little bit, and they both decided they wanted to go to Brighdy Isle, which is a place that many of the townsfolk in Rockaway Point had rowed their little boat out to, and had determined that there was something going on there, something that made them not want to return. So Abigail and Dakkar were like, we need some time away. We want to go see what's over there. And Abigail strongly felt the spirits of Brighdy Isle calling her to come visit. So as we bring in this next 3 chapters, we join them as they are making their way out to the rowboat. So this is chapter 3, Rowing Out. As Abigail boarded the small rowboat, she wasn't certain it could make the trip. Didn't they have anything larger? She asked Dakkar, who was struggling to right the small boat as he too stepped on board. He lifted the picnic basket, several folding chairs, and various other sundries he had been guided to bring into the bottom of the boat. Drats, he thought to himself. There's only one oar. What were they thinking? He made a mental note to follow up with the pier master at the small wharf for even allowing a boat like this to be taken out, and he chastised himself for not checking it more thoroughly. He had been so excited to be seeing his lady again, he wasn't thinking straight. He made another mental note to not be so distracted by Abigail, if that was even possible. Abigail and Dakkar held a long-time bond going back many lifetimes. They simply had to be together no matter what, even if they entered a lifetime where one started out behind and decided to stay in the etheric world. The other's magnetism and love would draw that disincarnate soul back into a lifetime just to be physically near the other. Fate and destiny always brought them home again. Dakkar picked up the one small oar and decided to make the best of it. I'll do some and then you, he said to her, hoping she could help row the small boat. His shoulder was aching again after too long a battle the night before. His nightly excursions with the bringers of the light during his many dream walks had left his physical body hurting in the morning. He didn't like battling that kind of demon, but such was the work. He had made it safely home through the astrals as he had always done, and now he needed to get rowing. The boat made its way towards the small isle. He estimated maybe a 5 to 10 minute row, but it looked to be much farther. He didn't know, since he hadn't actually been there before and only had local lore and townsfolk knowledge of the isle to go on. But something had been drawing him here too. Something he couldn't put his finger on either. So he had suggested the outing and was surprised that she had accepted. He didn't know why he felt her so distant as of late. Maybe he was imagining this. His love for her had never wavered, but she seemed preoccupied. He made yet another mental note to bring that up when the timing was better. He rowed and whistled some strange tune he had heard on late-night radio. It was something about a son and a father who couldn't seem to come together until it was too late. He let the tune fade in and out of his consciousness and decided that if he ever had a son, he would always be there for him. The boat slowly lurched towards the isle, and Dakkar handed the oar to Abigail. "So soon?" she said, taking it and getting it to move a little faster than he had. "My shoulder," he said, trailing off, still thinking about the imaginary son he'd never had. Abigail settled into rowing, and her mind wandered away to another time and space. She saw herself huddled over a little baby girl. She'd never had this vision before. Then she saw herself with a little blonde-headed girl of about 5 years old. The little girl held her hand and asked for juice and more of the fun stories that Abigail apparently had been sharing with her. The vision faded as the isle drew closer, and she contentedly rowed on. Only a few more minutes, she thought, gauging the distance. Dakkar reached for the oar and set back into rowing with more direct force now. Soon the little boat was grazing the bottom against the shoreline, and Dakkar disembarked and pulled it onto the sand. The weather seemed cooler out here, and he reached into his bag to pull out a sweater. He helped Abigail out and tied the boat against a large piece of driftwood. Fog was off in the distance, but over the isle the sun shined lazily, and birds and various sea creatures made themselves known. A dolphin jumped haphazardly out of the water offshore, showing off its pretty and powerful moves, all the while giggling at the couple. Oh, it had secrets to tell. Abigail pulled down the picnic basket as Dakkar gathered the other items and set them out on the sand. They decided to set up camp further back under the pine trees that dotted the shore. Dakkar went off looking for firewood while Abigail laid out the blanket. There was an odd sound in the trees, and Abigail winced. "Where are my manners?" she thought to herself. "We didn't even ask the spirits of the isle if it was okay to come ashore." She said a quick hello and sent blessings to the spirits of the isle as they quietly looked on with respect. Everyone else just set their feet down on the land and proceeded to disrespect it with their bad energy and littering. The spirits decided they had been right to call the couple home, and decided amongst themselves how they would make themselves known. There was much work to be done. Chapter 4. Heavy storm warning. Abigail pulled sandwiches out and started to take a drink from her carafe of coffee. Darn it, she had forgotten to put in the sugar. It was Dakkar. He had her mind all in a tingle, if that really was a thing. She was just so happy to be with him again. He made her heart feel whole inside, even though she knew she could make it on her own without him. She never wanted to try that. They were meant for each other, body and soul, and every time they were forced apart by the universe, she died a little inside. He was her person through and through. Dakkar returned with the firewood and set up a beautiful fire circle, complete with the sacred tools he had brought along. Something had told him to bring the scythe and his crossbow. Strange things for a small deserted isle, but he never doubted his internal guidance. It had gotten him out of many a tight spot. Let's take a deep breath. Just release. Being guided now just to send some healing energy through before we continue with the story. You don't have to accept this, but if you'd like to receive this, then you just have to silently or aloud accept the healing energy from me now. Waves of love, waves of comfort, waves of peace. Sandwich, Abigail said, handing him a vegan tuna on rye. He didn't like it all that much, but he didn't want to tell her that often when she wasn't around, he still liked to eat meat. It was just a part of who he was, but he knew how she was about the animals. He reached for the carafe of coffee and bilked at the sugarless drink. Bitter, he said, not so much complaining about the lack of sugar, but wondering why this particular blend was so strong. I know, Abigail said, smiling. I was doing too many things at once again. She laughed at herself instead of beating herself up about it. They lay down on the blanket and looked up at the clouds. Abigail's phone notification sounded, and she looked at the dark screen. I don't have very good reception out here, she said, frowning. This notification just came through from an hour ago. There's a severe storm warning offshore. It looks like we have a couple of hours to look around here, and then we better get out, she said, placing the phone on the blanket and smiling up at him. Well, you know what this means, he said, slyly placing the tasteless vegan tuna down. We better get moving. He looked at her knowingly. What is that supposed to mean, she said, knowing, at least she thought she did, what he was referring to. Naked hide and seek, he said, tagging her, and you're it. She laughed lightly, knowing how this game would end. All right, you, she said, you better get going, she said, placing her hand over her eyes and starting the countdown. I'll give you to the count of 50, and then I'm looking for you. Dakkar laughed as he made his way through the pines and towards a clearing on the other side. He wanted her to find him, and had already decided what article of clothing he would remove first. As Abigail counted loudly, gray clouds loomed ominously offshore. The spirits of the isle had magic up their etheric sleeves. They were determined that their lord and lady would not go home tonight. Chapter 5. Hide and Seek. Abigail finished counting as winds swept up around the pines, causing an ominous whistle through the branches. Ready or not, here I come, she yelled in the direction she thought she heard him go. Dakkar was ready, although he too had noticed the gray clouds gathering offshore. He hoped the picnic wouldn't be cut short before he could reveal his surprise to her. He heard her crunching along the fallen pine needles, and he dreamed about her coming up behind him and scaring him. Somehow all roads led back to her. He tried to make himself a little more visible, but not so much that he was blatantly out there. He wanted her to think she had won. I'm going to find you, she said, her voice embracing the inner child that lived inside her heart. Everything seemed to go silent all at once. The wind stopped, the clouds slowed down, and the voice of the isle rose up in the air. We welcome you home, it seemed to say, as the wind picked up again. Dakkar thought he heard something, but his mind was more focused on naked hide and seek. He was hunkered down beside a mulberry bush, and its leaves prickled him. He shifted slightly, but just enough to make a sound. The wind saved him, and he saw the tops of the trees swaying more now. We better head out soon, he thought to himself. Oh, well, maybe another day, he thought, clutching the velvet box to ensure it hadn't fallen out of his pocket. The bushes behind him rustled, and then, gotcha! Abigail squealed, jumping up behind him. He had let his daydreams take him away again. This was one reason he'd been so quiet with her the last several months. Whenever he thought of her, which was often, he had trouble focusing on his work. He did still have to work to do, although it seemed that at times he just sat around daydreaming of the future. He liked time off, but it was usually counterproductive for him. It was best to keep working and take breaks in between. He laughed, knowing full well he had done an awful job of hiding. He felt she knew it, too. Well, she said, let's have it. She eyed the mock-neck sweater he was wearing, and her breath caught as he peeled it off and tossed it her way. For some reason, his bare chest and shoulders were what always got her the most. It's where his heart was, and that's where the love came from. She gleefully clutched the sweater, and wanting to keep going, was just about to start her turn at hiding when Dakkar shushed her. Hey, wait a second, he said, holding his arm out to signal time out. What? She said, looking around. We're not alone, he said, eyeing something in the deep underbrush closer to the beach. I know that, silly, she said, laughing. The spirits of the isle are here with us, she said, feeling them in her bones. No, I think someone else is here, too, Dakkar said. But before he could elaborate, a huge pine bough came crashing down in front of them, torn away from the mother boughs by the now even stronger winds. "We've got to get off this isle," he said, holding her close. After she had moved into his arms, "This storm is definitely coming." Abigail, although disappointed, agreed with him, and they made their way back to their camp and the rowboat. But when they got closer to where they had left everything, Abigail gasped. The little boat was gone, and so was her cell. "What's going on here?" she said with indignance. But all she heard was a lilting laughter through the wind whistling in the trees. Do 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 do. What's going on? What's going on Brighdy Isle? Well, as always, in the Bringers of the Light, spirits of the Isle are conspiring, just like the spirits of the Argyle Inn conspired to heal Maggie and bring everyone closer together. Somehow these mysterious spirits of Brighdy Isle are conspiring to bring Dakkar and Abigail closer. Although this storm warning thing to me is more, well, it's literal, I guess, happening in the story, but metaphorical as well. Yeah, just lots of change and stuff brewing around. We get to see how Abigail and Dakkar maybe ride out this storm together. I don't know what happens. I never know. The spirits of the story like to surprise me. And so we only channel in what's down on the pages, and the rest I get a sense for what's happening, but I don't know the whole entire thing, which is the fun of it for me. So I think they're saying that's all they have to share right now. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. I hope to see you again on the podcast. I'm trying to think of maybe what the next episode is going to be, but there are resources already this month to support you if you're following kind of on a monthly basis. We've already done the April energy forecast. There's a pick a card. You just have to scroll back in the podcast a few episodes. There's the first part of this story. If you missed that, you can go back and listen to that. And if you're into light language, and if you're starseed, then, or you don't even have to be a starseed, but if you're into light language, then there is a light language activation and download for new beginnings, the episode right before this. And we'll see what comes up for next week. So I want to thank you all for joining me here. I thank you. The Bringers of the Light thank you. And we will see you all again soon in the next podcast episode. Take care. Thank you for listening to this podcast. It has been brought to you by the Bringers of the Light, an etheric group of higher light beings focused on service to Gaia, humanity, and the self as it pertains to the spiritual journey. So they are here to support you on your path to love and to working with others. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.